What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so there's not a whole hell of a lot of news outside of what everybody else is covering. And you guys know me, I don't like to cover the same news that everybody else is covering because it gets kind of redundant after a little while. You continually talking about this guy over here in Boulder, Colorado, that burning people alive. That's just insane if you ask me. But let's go ahead and I got a decent little news article for you guys today. Yeah, check this out. Can Trump fix the national debt? Republican senators, many investors, and even Elon Musk have doubts. Oh, is that so? I wonder why they have doubts. Maybe because nobody can absolutely fix the debt problem that we have in this country. That is a major problem. How do you fix for that? As a matter of fact, with the deficits that we're running, how do you fix that? You have to pretty much cut out the federal government for a while. And then there's nobody to actually collect the taxes. So it's like, what do you do at this point? But we got some ideas and we're going to get into that. But let's get into this right quick. Check this out, y'all. President Donald Trump faces the challenge of convincing Republican senators, global investors, voters, and even Elon Musk that he won't bury the federal government in debt with his multi-trillion-dollar tax breaks package. The response so far from financial markets has been skeptical as Trump seems unable to trim deficits as promised. What? He's only been in office for a few months at this point. Do you really expect him to just completely trim $1.8 trillion off of the federal deficit, for crying out loud? Like, once again, this is all manipulation, folks. I can't stand these articles. They're just so heavily manipulated. That is meant to make you think that, oh, Donald Trump's not doing anything about the deficit. Well, hang on. We just had some spending cuts, as a matter of fact. Look at what Doge has been doing. As a matter of fact, those are going to Congress right now. They're working up the packages so they can codify the Doge cuts. Actually, is what is going on right now. It hasn't made it there yet, but that is cutting the deficit. Right? You're not going to be able to trim $1.8 trillion off of the federal deficit. It just doesn't work that way. Not within a few months' time. Maybe over his 4-year period, sure, but you're not going to be able to do that in a few months' time. It is surprising that they were able to trim $150 billion off of that deficit. That is a major accomplishment in 3 months, maybe 4 months at the most. But oh no, they haven't done a damn thing, according to the corporate press. All of this rhetoric about cutting trillions of dollars of spending has come to nothing, and the tax bill codifies that, said Michael Strain, Director of Economic Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute, a right-leaning think tank. Yeah, I highly doubt that. Yep. You know what? These people are just Looney Tunes to think that you can just come in and automatically fix the deficit, for crying out loud. This reconciliation bill just reconciles the budget, right? What about next year's budget when all of the Doge cuts get codified and all of these employees are out the door? They still had to pay for the employees that they fired. They still have to pay for the fork in the road deal. They have to pay for all that. So nothing is going to get cut yet. But once again, these people, they're not telling you this. They're just saying, oh, Donald Trump's not doing anything. He's a bad guy. Come over here and we'll talk trash about Trump together. That's what they're trying to do. They're begging you to believe them. That's all they do. That's all they ever do. Is beg you to believe them and then manipulate their way right into your heart, folks. They sure will. Oh, a right-leaning think tank. Are you sure about that? There is a level of concern about the competence of Congress and this administration, and that makes adding a whole bunch of money to the deficit riskier. Did they add a whole bunch of money to the deficit? Once again, they're making statements of fact, but they are not fact. That is false. Did they add to the deficit? No, they didn't. They actually did make some cuts. The White House has viciously lashed out at anyone who has voiced concern about the debt snowballing under Trump, even though it did exactly that in his first term after his 2017 tax cuts. Did it, though? Did it not do the exact same thing under Joe Biden? Where were you guys when Joe Biden increased the deficit from $984 billion to $2 trillion, almost $2 trillion? Because Donald Trump's last fiscal year, the deficit was $984 billion. Or I'll say this. So Donald Trump's last year in office, we had COVID, and you guys remember the $2 trillion stimulus package, right? That was added on to the deficit. But hang on, folks. That was a one-time deal. That's not year over year. It's not going to be almost $3 trillion year over year. That was a one-time thing that should have been only been done one time, but Joe Biden comes in and, hey, he says, let's get another $1.5 trillion stimulus package and send that out to everybody. But what Biden did, if you look at Biden's deficit, it was 1.5 trillion, 1.6 trillion, 1.7 trillion, 1.8 trillion dollars. It only increased under Joe Biden. And where were these people? Nowhere to be found. They're not telling you, oh, what about Joe? You know, they're not playing whataboutism at all. They're just telling you that, hang on, Donald Trump is a bad guy. Hey, don't blame him for not playing whataboutism. But that's what I'm going to do, because context matters. Nuance matters. It absolutely does. And these people are insane for thinking that, oh, they can just tell you, oh, Donald Trump's not doing anything about the deficit whatsoever and get away with it. It really is insane. It's almost like reverse whataboutism, if that's even a real thing. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt opened her briefing Thursday by saying she wanted to debunk some false claims about his tax cuts. Oh, is that viciously attacking somebody? No, that's how she opened her press briefing. You love how they said that, huh? Viciously lashed out at anyone who has voiced concern about the debt snowballing under Trump. That's funny. It's freaking hilarious. What do you mean lashed out? Show me some instances of this, because I haven't seen that, actually. Leavitt said the blatantly wrong claim that the one big beautiful bill increases the deficit is based on the Congressional Budget Office and other scorekeepers who use shoddy assumptions and have historically been terrible at forecasting across Democrat and Republican administrations alike. That is right. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, when they did all their figurations, or whatever you want to call it, calculating for the big beautiful bill, they came up with, oh, it's going to raise the deficit, it's going to balloon the deficit, but they only used like a 1.1 or 1.8 GDP increase year over year, essentially. And it's never been that it hasn't been 1.8 for a very long time. Actually, under Donald Trump's last administration, I think that it averaged like 3.2. That's with his tax cuts and everything, 3.2% GDP growth. So that's what the House Republicans, as a matter of fact, they used a similar GDP to factor in, and when you factor in a 3.2 or 3 point whatever percent GDP growth, you get a reduction in the deficit. These people, they're just nuts, y'all. They really are. House Speaker Mike Johnson piled onto Congress's number crunchers on Sunday, telling NBC's Meet the Press, CBO sometimes gets projections correct, but they're always off every single time when they project economic growth. Right, which is what they were talking about with this. They always underestimate the growth that will be brought about by tax cuts and reduction in regulations. But Trump himself has suggested that the lack of sufficient spending cuts to offset his tax reductions came out of the need to hold the Republican Congressional coalition together. It kind of did, actually. We have to get a lot of votes, Trump said last week. We can't be cutting. Right, not yet. Cutting comes later. That has left the administration betting on the hope that economic growth can do the trick, a belief that few outside Trump's orbit think is viable. That's not true at all. A lot of people bank on economic growth. They do a lot of calculating. They do a lot of estimates. They do a lot of betting on economic growth to forecast numbers, to get all kinds of different things. So, no, it's not just people inside Trump's orbit that think this. A lot of economists think this way as well. Most economists consider the nonpartisan CBO to be the foundational standard for assessing policies, though it does not produce cost estimates for actions taken by the executive branch, such as Trump's unilateral tariffs. Now, what that entire paragraph was meant to do is to debunk what I just said. But that doesn't do that, because if you notice what they said, most economists consider the nonpartisan CBO to be foundational standard for assessing policies. What do policies have anything to do with the budget? Nothing, actually. Oh, sure, it might have a little bit to do here and there, blah, 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 blah. But they cleverly word their way around lies. It's fascinating, Tech billionaire Musk, who was until recently part of Trump's inner sanctum. What do you mean, was? Just because he's leaving Doge doesn't mean he's not still advising Donald Trump. Once again, statements of fact that are blatantly untrue. As the leader of the Department of Government Efficiency told CBS News, I was disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decreases it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing. Yeah, he looked at the CBO estimates of the big beautiful bill or whatever, and he came to that conclusion that it increases the deficit. But once again, when we factor in the fact that the CBO is always off on the GDP estimates, their percentage growth, and then you go and look at the historical GDP growth, and you factor that in, we do get deficits. Now, I will be the first to say that I am disappointed as well there weren't more cuts to spending, but I am also of the opinion that, you're not going to get everything you want all at once. It's just not how this is going to work, right? I would love to have the Trump administration come in, fire everybody, and get our deficit down to zero. But that's just not a reality that we can live with. No. In, a year from now, if we still have a ballooning deficit, if we don't get the economic growth that we were supposed to get, that we were estimated to get, then we're going to have problems. You're going to see me criticizing Donald Trump. But I can't really go in on him yet. He hasn't been in office long enough, for crying out loud. Just saying. Federal debt keeps rising. The tax and spending cuts that passed the House last month would add more than $5 trillion to the national debt in the coming decade if all of them are allowed to continue, according to the Committee for a Responsible Financial Budget, a fiscal watchdog group. To make the bill's price tag appear lower, various parts of the legislation are set to expire. The same tactic was used with Trump's 2017 tax cuts, and it set up this year's dilemma, in which many of the tax cuts in that earlier package will sunset next year unless Congress renews them. See, this is another tactic that they use, because those tax cuts were set to expire at the end of 2025. They take the tax numbers that the tax numbers would have resorted to outside of Trump's tax cuts, and then they figure that's how they figure that $5 trillion over X amount of years or whatever. This is all manipulation, folks. It really is. But the debt is a much bigger problem now than it was 8 years ago. Investors are demanding the government pay a higher premium to keep borrowing, as the total debt has crossed $36.1 trillion. The interest rate on a 10-year Treasury note is around 4.5%, up dramatically from the roughly 2.5% rate being charged when the 2017 tax cuts became law. Yeah, the debt is bad, but you know what? That's fascinating, because a month ago, when I looked at the debt clock, it was at almost $3 trillion. I wonder where they're getting that $36.1 trillion from. Because that 36.1 doesn't sound right. As a matter of fact, it is $36.9 trillion at this point. So it's almost $37 trillion, folks. $37 trillion. That's an insane number. The White House Council of Economic Advisors argues that its policies will unleash so much rapid growth that the annual budget deficits will shrink in the size relative to the overall economy, putting the U.S. government on a fiscally sustainable path. Hopefully. The council argues the economy would expand over the next 4 years at an annual average of about 3.2% instead of the Congressional Budget Office's expected 1.9%, and as many as 7.4 million jobs would be created or saved. That's fascinating, don't you think? Like, look at the economic growth, right? Once again, folks, it hasn't been 1.9% in a very, very long time, if ever. Right? You can go back and check the stats. I haven't done that, but I do know that at least for the past 30 years, it hasn't been 1.9%. It hasn't been that low. It's been at 2%, so almost, but it's never been 1.9%. And under Donald Trump, it did go up a good bit, which a good bit for the GDP growth is like 2 or 3%. I think it went from like 2.5 to 3.2 under Donald Trump. So the economy was booming. It was just expanding rapidly. So it was great. It was really good, and that was mostly because of the spending, the tax bill, the Jobs Tax Cuts Jobs Act, or whatever the hell it was called. I forget what it was actually called, but something like that. We'll put it that way. But and Trump's trying to do that again. So using an insanely low number, and that's, once again, that's where the Democrats, and that's where all the detractors, they're getting their numbers from. Now, once again, folks, I'm a fiscal hawk. I don't like government spending at all. I think they should have cut a whole hell of a lot more. And I'm easy to say that. I wish Donald Trump would have cut more. But I was under the impression that we're not going to be able to just cut $1.8 trillion out of the deficit. That would be nice if we could, but that's just not a reality. I do understand that it's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take some time to get back down to those numbers. You can't just cut government agencies like that. It just doesn't work. So we're in a bit of a problem. But once again, you blame that on the previous Congresses, as a matter of fact, because they have been digging us a debt hole for a very long time now, ever since the late 90s. And they've done nothing to try to fix it. They only increase spending. Instead of trying to decrease spending, they've only increased spending and then complain about the debt. It's like, what are y'all even doing? It doesn't make any sense to me, but I think I've rambled on for long enough on this one, y'all. Y'all don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. And if you could, look below the video. Click that join button, sign up, become a member. Help me deliver better news to you guys, because that's what I love doing, y'all. Y'all do that for me, and y'all let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. And y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.